Hello there, Mrs. Elke here. Today I am doing a painting that's a little bit different than what I normally do, and that is because I am working on some music. So you could find maybe a piece of music that's older, maybe it even has some yellowing pages and you could paint on that. I went ahead and found a picture of old music online and printed it on watercolor paper. So that is how I got my music. And this is what I painted. So I found a picture of a church, just like a coloring book, a church that looked wintry. And then I added that by drawing and using Sharpie. And then of course added some beautiful paint with watercolor and a little bit of white acrylic. And I've done this a couple times. This is my Oh Holy Night. And then I also did one for Silent Night. So you can see they're a little bit different, but both just beautiful. These would make great Christmas cards or just great visuals around your church. So follow along if you would like to do something similar and let me know how it goes. Thanks. Now for this picture, I am using my printed out hymn on watercolor paper. And I could use like a coloring book page of a church, but I'm just going to free draw one. I'm going to keep it pretty simple and we'll make that work. So I'm going to start kind of lower down on my paper and I'm going to make a horizontal line that will be the door of my church. So you can kind of decide how big your door is going to be. I'm going to make the line in between the doors because I think I want it to be a double door and I want it to be kind of arched. So I'm going to add a curve line down here to the bottom. And I went a little bit inside of my horizontal line that I started with. And next I want to add kind of a little roof over the door. I'm adding the roof kind of like the top of a triangle, and you can really put it anywhere. You can make it higher up, it can be wider, it can be narrower, it really doesn't matter. Then I'm going to make a little part up above my roof for the little bell to go in the church. So this is like the steeple. And again, you can kind of decide what you want to do. You can make just one line, you could make a couple lines going up. I'm going to make a horizontal line here and then another vertical here. And maybe I'll stop with a triangle way on top for the steeple. So it depends on kind of how big your church is and what you want to do. But I do want to kind of stop before I get all the way up to the words because I want to still see the title of the hymn. I have also done these on just paper that have music and no words, so that's another option too. This is going to be my little roof. I'm going to go ahead and make some lines down on the sides here next to my door. My door is very large, so it makes my church look pretty small, but that's okay. And then I'm also going to add some other elements on the sides here. I decided that I wanted a couple of evergreen trees in my picture, so I went ahead and I'm adding some evergreens on both sides. We'll do one here, and then I think I want to have one on this side to make it somewhat symmetrical. And then I'm just kind of using like a zigzag line to make the outline of my evergreens. And then I also want to add some steps kind of coming down. So I'm just going to make some more horizontal lines under the door so that it looks like there's some steps coming down in front of my church. And you decide how many steps you want. Again, you're the artist. I can kind of make them get a tiny bit wider as they come down, or they can all be just the same size. It really doesn't matter. I might add just kind of an indication of the snowbanks. I think I want to add a roof first though, so I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of a line here to show this is kind of where the snow would be on this part of the roof. And then I want to add a horizontal line for some more roof. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right here, and then make where it stops kind of a little bit lower here. So it's kind of like a trapezoid shape. So shorter on the top, longer on the bottom, and then it has some diagonal lines that go down. And then I also need some lines on the very outside, so I'll go ahead and add some right there too. They kind of come down about to where the door is. And then I will add some windows. And you can decide where you want the windows to be. You can decide how many windows you want. I'm going to try to keep mine pretty simple. I think I'm going to have some windows over here on the sides as well. And I like having them kind of arched on the top and flat on the bottom. So I'm going to do that. And then I feel like I need a little bit of snowbank here, kind of coming up to my church, and maybe down here too, kind of in front of my trees. And then I will add a couple of trees kind of in the background too. So I'll just put, kind of a little trees here just outside of my church shape as well. I'm going to add maybe a frame for my door so my door doesn't look so huge. And then of course, like the door knobs too would be good. You can also add some designs in your windows. You could make them look like stained glass, really do whatever you would like to them. Make them fancy, keep them simple. It's totally up to you. And I feel like we're close. I'll add a little bit up here by where the bell would be, by just adding a little arch like this that would be open for the bell. And then once I get to the point where I'm finished with my drawing, I will go ahead and put my Sharpie away and then paint. Now, if you just drew with pencil, that's fine, but you may want to trace it with Sharpie just so that you can see your lines a little bit better. Now, I'm using watercolor paint, and I'm starting with the sky, and I want the sky to be really, really dark right next to the church. So there's a couple ways you can do that. You can just use lots and lots of paint right next to the church and then add a little bit more water as you get farther away. That's probably the easiest way to do it. So as I get farther out, I'm just using clear water, but as I'm right next to the church and the trees, I'm using a lot more paint. So I want it to be really dark, ideally right next to the church, so that it'll kind of help frame it. And then that way, when I paint a little bit of blue on the church, it won't just get mixed up with the sky. So the darker I can get right next to it, the better. And I'm going to go ahead and fill this around, and I'm trying to have it kind of softly just go off, not even all the way to the edge of my picture. I'm just having it kind of softly go off kind of in the middle, and then I'm filling in all around it with my brush. And that way I can get a nice dark blue sky. If you have purple, you could also mix a little bit of purple with your blue. That's a great way to get it to be a little bit darker. And I wanted to make a really nice rich sky color and then have it just kind of disappear off to the edges. So the more paint you have and the less water, then the darker, richer the color will be. So I'm getting nice and dark and rich with my color. I also wanted to add a little bit of color to the snow in the foreground. I don't want it to be as dark as the sky, but I do want to add hints of blue down there too, since it's kind of a night sky. That way it will look super bright white. Next, I'm cleaning my brush off and I'm switching to a smaller brush, and I want to go ahead and add some warmth to my picture. So I'm starting off with the doors of my church, and I'm just using a nice warm brown color. This is like a burnt sienna color, and I'm painting those in. And then I can even darken it a little bit on the bottom to add a little bit of shading. And then I also want to add some warmth to my windows. So I'm going to use kind of some nice warm yellows, um, golden colors here, and I'm painting inside of my windows with those so that it looks like they are on. The lights are on inside. Maybe there's a little service, an evening service, an Advent service going on. You can add a hint of gold too if you have gold paint. That looks nice. If you want to get real fancy with like stained glass colors, you could even add maybe some hints of orange and red and things like that to your windows as well. I also want to add a little bit of warmth to my church. So maybe my church is feeling some of the glow from the windows. So I added just a very watered down yellow to my church. The rest of my church I want to look like it's white. So in order for it to kind of have a little bit of shadow or shading, I'm starting with some blue on the sides of it, and I'm filling the rest of it in kind of with this blue. And then I really want to try to darken the areas that are in shadow, which would be like under a roof. So if there's a shadow under a roof, or if there's a part that would be normally in shadow, I just want that to be a little bit of a darker blue. But I'm really trying not to go as dark as my sky. So you can see there's a hint of blue, but it's not quite my sky blue. So see if you can kind of make something in between. I'm also adding some color on my steps, and then anywhere else that I can still see parts of my church here showing through. So it's light, lighter than my sky, but there's still some blue here going on with my church. I'm going to keep tweaking that, keep adding some shadow right under my roof until I get to the point where it's all nice and filled in with color. I'm just painting my trees in green. I'm not worrying too much about any snow that would be on them because I will add that later with some acrylic paint. So for now, I'm just painting them in, getting them nice and filled with my green paint. Once I get all of my trees painted in, I'm going to just let those dry. This would be a good time if I want to make any adjustments in the sky I could. Like I might want to make parts next to my church even darker so I could go in and add another layer of dark right next to my church, and that would make it quite a bit darker. So I'm going to go ahead and do that just with some blues and purples. I can also make it a little bit darker right by where the ground is so that the ground kind of comes forward and the sky goes back. So I'm just trying to kind of work in some of those dark areas. And then I also want to add a little bit of warmth to the top corners of my picture so that it looks like my music is kind of yellowed or old. So it also helps tie in the warmth to my church. So I've got the warm windows and the door, and so having a little bit of warmth in the background is kind of nice to balance that out. The last thing I'm going to use is some craft paint, and I'm going to go ahead and add some white paint to my trees to add some snow, and I'm just kind of doing it in little like blotches kind of along the trees and letting some of that green still show through. And then I'm also going to use some of the white in other areas that might need some snow too. So I could do it kind of on the roof. I could also add little dots here and there in the background. Anything else that you want to include some snow on would be good. And then I use a toothbrush with a little bit of water on it in my paint, and I kind of flick that at my picture, and that gives it this nice snowy feel. So that's a great way to add that kind of snowy magic at the very end of the picture. And there you have my finished piece, the church on the music, this one Silent Night. And yeah, that is all. Thanks so much for watching and hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you try this out, please share with me how it goes. I love hearing about your artistic endeavors as well. Thanks so much for watching and join me for more fun art on Elke Art.